Welcome back to Math Mini Lessons. My name is Sarah, and in this video we're breaking down all the constructed response questions for the 7th grade state test using 2024 questions. Because this test can be on paper or it can be on computer, I'm going to show you how I would write out my answers on scrap paper and also how to transfer it on computer based, because after 2025, all 7th graders in New York will take the state test on computers anyway. In the last video, I broke down all the multiple choice questions. In this video, we're going to go into the constructed response, and there are 10 constructed response. And it's broken up into 3 1-point questions, 6 2-point questions. Nope, Siri, I'm good. And then 1 3-point question. Okay, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to look at those 10 problems together. And as you're going through, check off and see how many points you have gotten. And then we'll add up all the points together and see what you would have gotten if you had taken this test for the state test. All right, let's get ready to jump into the first one. Let's start with our very first 1-point problem. And for this one, there are actually different ways we can express this because these are equations. You can give yourself 1 point if you had 25t is equal to w, or if you had w is equal to 25t, or if you had 25 is equal to w over t. So any of those, if you have them, give yourself 1 point. If you had anything that's not one of these, then you have to give yourself 0 points. So even if you had t over w, that doesn't count. That would have to be 0 points. So let's break this problem down. Marty types an average of 25 words a minute. That's our constant rate. That's our K, because we know he's doing 25 words per minute. So if I wanted to figure out how much he typed in, let's say 5 minutes, I knew I would do 25 times 5 would tell me he wrote 50 words. Okay, and when I'm writing it out this way, think about it. Our words is our W. Our W is equal to 25, which is our rate, times the number of minutes, T. So that's how I can have 25T is equal to W, or you could have had it written out the other way. W is equal to 25T. The other thing you could have done is, let's say, and some kids may have done this, they could have said that 25t is equal to w. They could have just divided, this is another equivalent expression, and gotten 25 is equal to w over t. 25 is equal to the words over time. All right, so again, give yourself a point if you had any of these 3 equations on the bottom, and 0 if you didn't, and correct your work so you understand how to do this. Let's look at our next 1-point problem. It's a very simple expression. We just have to find the value for it and simplify it. -2 times -3 times 4, and this would equal 24. So give yourself 1 point if you have 24, 0 points if you have anything else. And for this, we're just remembering our conventions for multiplying with positive and negative integers. So if we start with the first 2, because I like to multiply from left to right, a negative times a negative would give me a positive 6. And positive 6 times positive 4 gives me positive 24. All right, so give yourself a point if you had positive 24, or just 24. Give yourself 0 points if you had anything else. Here's our last 1-point question. Give yourself 1 point if you had 30%. Anything else, give yourself 0 points. All right, so let's break down this problem. Kenneth bought a shirt that was originally priced $55. That was the original price. And after a discount, he paid $38.50. So the price went down. What percent discount on the original price was the shirt? Oh, okay. So what we're going to do here is let's think of it as Why don't we do it as a ratio? And there are different ways, again, we can approach this, but I like looking at the money and the percents for a minute. And the original price was $55, which represents 100%. And my new price is $38.50. So what percent is this? So I can figure this out by just cross multiplying. So I'm going to multiply 38.50 times 100, and I get 3,850. And 55 times the number is 55N. And to figure out what that number is, I'm going to divide, both sides by 55. So I have N is equal to 38.50 divided by 55 equals 70%. So let's think about this. This means that the cost of this cost over here represents 70%. But I want to know what percent was discounted. So if the shirt, if what I paid, $38.50 is 70%, then my discount, what they took off, was 30%. That's my discount. So again, there are so many different ways we can approach this type of problem. Another way we could approach this is we can think, what happens if I know the entire price, $55? What would I have to multiply it by to get $38.50? Because I know I'm getting a lower percentage. Like what percentage would give me this? And when we do that, again, we're still dividing by 55. And you're still going to get that. Let's see. Let's put in here. 38.50 divided by 55 gives us 0.7. So that's the total cost. And then what we would have to think again, then how much was taken off. And that's another way that you can solve this. Okay? So of cost. So here I'm just putting, this is the new amount. And so the change was 0.3 or 30%. Okay? So again, we're thinking about relationships with numbers. And when I think about percent, I'm thinking, am I talking about the part or the whole? And I also want to remember the original context of the problem and what my numbers represent in them. All right, hit pause and jot this down into your notes. All right, here's our first 2-point problem, first of 6. And here, not only do I have to answer the question, I have to explain my answer. So let's actually go through the question. I'll read the question and then I'll show the answer and explain it. Frank and his friends are playing a game with a spinner shown below. Each player spins the arrow 5 times, and all the numbers the spinner lands on get to their score. Frank's first 3 spins are -1 and 5/10, +2, and -3 and 5/10. Frank has 2 more spins. What 2 numbers, this is what we're responsible for answering. Our role is to figure out what 2 numbers would the spinner need to land on for his score to equal 0. So there are 2 possible answers we can get here. And you can you can count for either one. So he could either land on 1 and 2 or 3 and 0. So I'm just answering that first part. And so let me explain how we got just to this section. So far, he's landed on -1 and 5/10, +2, plus -3 and 5/10. So if I add all of these together, and I'm going to go and move to my calculator on Nextera. So let's clear the memory for a second. And I'm just going to put in my answers by 3 spins, +2, plus -3.5, and I get -3. Okay, so that's what he has. So in order for him to get 0, I have to have a +3. to get to 0. So what 2 spins can give me a total of 0? And that's what the question is asking. So you have to look and see on your spinner what combinations could you have to get a positive 3. And I could land on these two because 1 plus 2 will give me positive 3. And I could land on 3 and 0. That can also give me a positive 3. No other combination will give me a positive 3. So I notice like I can't add 4 plus anything, even my negative numbers, because they all have 5/10. So there's no way I can add with 4 to get any combination with 3. And the same thing with the rest of these numbers here. There's no way I don't have another number, a positive number, that I can add to get me to a positive 3. Okay, so those are the spins. So I need to explain all of that in my writing. Okay, that there are no other combinations. Okay, so let's move into, let me close out my calculator and let's put in our answer onto the next error part, an explanation. All right, I'm moving over to next error. I'm going to extend my answer part just a little bit. And okay, let's start by answering the question, what 2 numbers would the spinner need to land on? So I'm going to just restate the question. The spinner would need to land on 1 and 2, or it can land on 3 and 0 for Frank's 3 and 0 for Frank's score to equal 0. In Frank's 3 spins, he has negative 1.5, 2, and negative 3.5. The sum of his 3 spins is negative 3. For his score to add up to 0, his next 2 spins need to add up to positive 3. The only ways he can get positive 3 on the spinner is to get a 1 and 2 or a 3 and 0, period. All right, so now I'm just going to reread it to see if my thinking made sense. Because remember, you're going to get a point for saying the right combination. And I put both combinations. You could have just said 1 and 2 or 3 and 0. You could have put one or the other. You didn't have to put both to get that point. So I reread it again, because when I read it again, I'm editing again and checking to make sure if that's what I really mean. The spinner would need to land on 1 and 2, or it can land on 3. See, I forgot the 0. And 0 for Frank's score to equal 0. In Frank's 3 spins, he has negative 5, negative 1.25, 2, and negative 3.5. The sum of his 3 spins is negative 3. For his score to add up to 0, his next 2 spins would need to add up to positive 3. The only way to get positive 3 on the spinner is to get a 1 and 2, or to get a 3 and 0. And done. So look back at your work and give yourself either a 0, 1, or 2. Give yourself 2 points if you have the right combination and you explained it clearly. And that's where we have to really push ourselves, because sometimes what makes sense in our brain doesn't always make sense to another person. So check to see how clear you were in explaining your answer. And if you did both of those things for a point, if you only give the answer but your explanation wasn't fantastic or wasn't as clear, you can give yourself 1 point. And if you didn't give that combination and you didn't really explain, you will give yourself 0 points. Let's look at our next 2-point problem. The answer for this is 2.5 miles or 2.5 miles an hour. So let's see how you can do this. Remember, you have to show your work and get this answer, so to show your work matters. even if I'm doing this on computer, I'm going to work out all my math on paper. I'm going to do that because I want to just think about the problem and have my whole brain concentrate on the math. If you try to do the math while on the computer, and unless you have a pencil, Apple Pencil, or a stylus, it's really hard to do that. Your brain might have to spend energy thinking about how to type it, and that's going to take away the energy you need to do the math. So I always do the work on paper first, and then I transfer over what's important. And this is cool because then I may not have to copy everything onto the show your work section, but I'll show you what I mean here. Joanne went for a hike. The trail she hiked was 5.5 miles, and it took her 2 1/5 hours to complete. If Joan hiked an average rate, how fast in miles per hour did Joan hike? Okay, so she did 5.5 miles in 2 1/5 hours. So I'm going to do a fraction way for doing this, and I will do a decimal way for doing this. I'll do the fraction way first. So I could just divide 5.5 divided by 2 1/5 and change both of these to improper fractions. 5.5 is 11 over 2. Let me not do that part yet so you can just see what I'm doing here. Times 2 1/5 is 11 over 5. And now I would rewrite this as a multiplication sentence, and you get 55 over 22, which you can now simplify. I'm going to simplify both of these by 11, so I get 5 over 2, which is the same as 2.5. So that's one pathway if you wanted to keep everything as fractions. If you wanted to change these to decimals, I would have 5.5 divided by 2 2/10. Now again, how did I get the 2 2/10? If you don't know, you can just change your 1/5 using division, 1 divided by 5. And you would get 2/10. So that's all I did. So I could just do 5.5, 5.5, clear, 5.5 divided by 2.2 equals 2.5. That's all I did. Now, you decide which one you would want to put into your work. All right, so remember we had to have the right answer, and we have to show our work correctly. Clearly, in this case, decimals was the easier way to go, but we also know some kids probably did it with fractions, so I'll show both. So for my final answer, I'm going to just answer the question. Joanne hiked at a rate of 2.5 miles per hour. That's it. Or if you wrote as a fraction, Joanne hiked at a rate of, and then I would just hit the mixed number button. I can bring this down. 2 1/2 miles per hour. Either one is fine. All right, so let's actually show our work for this. And if I did the decimal way, I would just show how where I got my numbers from. That's all teachers really want to know, is like, where'd you get your numbers from? So I would take my original one, 5 1/2 divided by 2, not 12, and 1/5. And I'm going to say rewrite as 5.5 divided by 2.2, which is equal to 2.5. That's it. That's if I did it that way. Now, if you had it the other way, let's say you had it the other way, I'm going to put in as fractions. It's a little bit more work. I'm not going to tell you something different. Divided by, here's my little fraction part, 2 and 1/5. And then I just skipped to the next row to show the next thing I did. I changed them now to improper fractions. 11/2 divided by 11/5. And then I just rewrote it. And so this is what's a little bit more tedious when you do it this way. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. I'm going to be honest with you. It takes me more time to type in fractions than it did than if I was just doing the decimals. And I think that's kind of why I liked it a little bit better. So 5/11, which is equal to, and I have to put another fraction, 55/22, which is equal to 5/2, which is equal to, and then my final answer, 2.5. And boom, there you go. So either way will work. Again, when you're typing in the fractions just take longer. And I try to give space and go down and down just so I could see everything. I will say that there were some teachers years ago that would not have, will probably take a point away because I have so many equal signs. So if you're worried about that, you can say or instead of having other equal signs, because again, you never know who's grading your paper. Or, all right. So, and I've been in those rooms where we've been grading and I've seen teachers go, well, that's not an equation because you have multiple equal signs. Ding, taking away points. Even though I'm like, but we know what the kid meant. They were just converting it into another way that's equivalent. I understood that, but because I know that for some people that really matters is not it isn't an equation with so many equal signs. So if you see that in your work, you can just put or and then simplify the fraction and then simplify it one more time. So now here is very clear that you know what an equation is and that you're just converting it into equivalent numbers. Okay, so hit pause and try this out in your work. Here's our next 2-point problem. It's another one where I have to show my work and give an answer. The answer to this is 4 5/10 centimeters. So let's break it down. The map has a scale of 1 centimeter is equal to 50 miles. The actual distance between New York and New York City is 225 miles. What is the distance in centimeters between the two cities? All right, so I have a ratio. I have 1 centimeter is equal to 50 miles. So I'm going to write this. So what we have, I'm going to write this in a ratio table. Centimeters, miles, 1 to 50, that's my given ratio. And they're telling us that the real one is 225 miles. So just put it in the same miles category. Here's the number. Now, you could look to see like how many 50s give you 125. It's not going to be a nice easy number. Same thing here. I can't just multiply something by 50 and it's not going to give you an easy number here, but you can cross multiply. And that's why we have so many different ways of doing things, because something that might work really well for one problem may not work as easily for the other one. So let's multiply across this way. 50 times the number. Let's multiply this way. 225. And now let's write that equation. 225 is equal to 50 times the number. So let's divide both sides by 50 so we can isolate the variable, get that number. Get our calculator up. 225 divided by 50 is equal to 4.5 centimeters. And that's it. So now here's the challenge. How am I going to put that into the show your work section? So we're going to start by putting the answer. The distance between New York and DC is 4.5 centimeters. or the distance on the map between New York and DC is 4.5 centimeters. So now I need to put this into a show your work. Now it'd be really easy, especially with ratio squares. I would love to just use the drawing feature and just draw it in. But I'm going to start by just putting in, like, what can I put in? So 1 centimeter is equal to 50 miles. And then over here, I'm going to try and figure out, I'm going to put it as a fraction. So let's do that part. Where's my fraction? Here we go. 1 centimeter, 50 miles is equal to, now it's not going to look like a box, but it's still a proportion. This is the number I want. I'm going to put that question mark in there, and 225 miles. Okay? How many centimeters is 225 miles? Okay? So I did that, and then I'm just going to say cross multiply, because that's what I did, and that's how I got 225 is equal to 50. Now I don't want a question mark there, I want x is equal to 50x. Okay, that works. And now I'm going to just divide both sides. So 225 divided by 50 is equal to 50x divided by 50. That's what I did. And on one side I got 4.5 is equal to x. Okay? So again, all I was really just trying to be creative and show, like, I can't make it all look the way I wanted to. Instead of getting frustrated, I tried to figure out what could I write. And I took the original part and I was still able to make a proportion. So I didn't draw the whole square, but you can see the 1/50 is equal to x over 225. And I told them I cross multiplied to get 225 is equal to 50x. And then I just divided both sides by 50, and I wrote that out. So you can see I divided both expressions by 50 to get my final answer. So I would say practice this. Do not wait until you have to do a computer-based test to practice doing it on a platform like this. If your school is still doing it on paper, awesome. What you have on paper, what I just did on paper, is good enough. It shows the work. But for those of you who are doing it on computers, you're going to have to do some extra thinking about how you're going to represent what you have on paper onto the computer. And I don't think you should wait until the state test to do that. So I'm also going to link this sample page so that you can also practice writing your answers or even doing sample questions from the 7th grade test at home before the state test. All right, that is what I am giving to you because I think it's important for you to practice and not wait till you're being tested when you're super stressed to do it for the first time. But hit pause and make any corrections that are necessary to your work. All right, let's do the next one. It's another 2-point question. The answer for this one is 19. So let's break it down. During lunch, a sandwich shop owner sold 2 types of sandwiches, turkey and roast beef. Each sandwich cost $4.99. The total sales was $219.56. So think about this. He sold turkey and he sold roast beef and he made $219.56. There were 25 turkey sandwiches. How many were roast beef? So I have no idea how many roast beef. Okay, so I know he sold 25 turkey for $4.99. I don't know how many roast beef, so that's my X. Wait, that's my unknown. But I do know they were $4.99 each, so $4.99 times X. And he makes $219.56. Yeah, we already know I'm using a calculator for this one. All right, so let's start simplifying out the parts that we can do. I'm going to do this part first. 25 times $4.99 is $124.75 plus 499x is equal to 219.56. Yep, you could already see it's written in that AX plus B equals C. That's the format we're going with. So I'm going to take this out of this side and out of this side. So we're going to make a zero pair. So I'm going to subtract 124.75 here to make a zero pair, leaving me with 499x. And I'm going to subtract 124.75 here. And we're going to use our calculator to 19.56 minus 124.75 is equal to $94.81. And now I'm going to isolate the x by dividing by 499 on both expressions. So we're going to divide by my answer by 499, and I get 19. And if you wanted to, you can go back in and just check your work by substituting 19 and seeing if you get the same number. Now we got to go and put all this into our work. So let's start by putting the answer. By answering the question, how many roast beef sandwiches were sold? 19 roast beef sandwiches were sold. All right, so I'm going to start by just putting T plus, or turkey plus roast beef equals 219.56 in sales. So I just wrote that in there. And now I'm just going to put in my work. 25 times 499 plus 499x is equal to 219.56. And now I'm going to do that 25. So I know that's going to be 124.75 plus 499x is equal to 219.56. All right, so remember, this is where I can't show unless I have a pencil, and I'm doing this assuming that most kids don't. So the first thing I'm going to do is show that I'm subtracting 124 from both sides. So 124.75 minus 124.75 plus 499x is equal to 219.56 minus 124.75. Okay, so that way we can see what I subtracted the same from both sides, and I got 499x is equal to, and I can look back at my work, $94.81. Cool. Now what do I want to do? I want to divide both sides by 499. So I'm going to do 499x divided by $4.99 is equal to 94.81 divided by 499. So there's no confusion what I did. I'm showing you I'm doing it to both sides, that I'm doing the same operation to both sides. And now let me move down this little part here. I can put in my final answer. So x is equal to 19 sandwiches. Boom, done. So there you have it. So you can see, I want you to see both at the same time because they both showed math. But remember what your goal is. If you're doing it on paper, you want someone to be able to follow along. But if you're typing on a computer, you also want someone to be able to follow along. So that's why I like typing it out so you can see what I did in each step. And after every time I go down to the next line, you can see I'm doing something else. And then I go down to the next line, I simplify it. I go down to the next line, I do something else. This way, No matter who grades my paper, they know I know what I'm doing because that's what I'm communicating to them with my work. And your work, really honestly, it's showing what you know. That's the important part. It's not about what you know in your head, it's about what you can prove on that paper. And that's what they're looking for. And this shows on this computer screen, proving what I know how to do. Hit pause and jot this down into your notes. 2 more 2-point problems to go, and it's another show your work. Side note, there are way more show your work in 7th grade than there were on the 6th grade test, because I literally did every test from 3rd grade all the way to 8th grade. Way more show your work than in 6th grade. But I digress. For this one, the answer is for 46, negative 12 plus 8x. Or you could have said 8x minus 12. Either way. So let's jump into it. Write an expression. The expression negative 8 times 4 minus x plus 20 as the sum of 2 unlike terms. So they're just asking us to simplify this to 2 terms. That's all they're saying. So I'm going to start by distributing first. Negative 8 times 4 is negative 32. Negative 8 times negative x is positive 8x plus 20. I know these are my like terms, so I like to put them next to each other. And now I can simplify those. Negative 32 plus 20. I'm going to get negative 12 plus 8x. Done. All right, this one won't be so bad to show work, thankfully. So let's start by putting our final answer. Write the expression in unlike terms. So I'm just going to put negative 12 plus 8x. That's all I have to do. All right, and now I'm going to show it. I'm going to start by just writing it out. So 4 minus x plus 20. Okay? Now, the first thing I'm going to do is distribute. So I'm going to put negative 32 plus 8x plus 20. I'm even going to write, first I will distribute. Okay, so again, why is it, I hate when it has that weird line there. I know I spelled it right. All right, so I have that. So I'm going to put, then I will put like terms next to each other, which is really the commutative property, to be honest. So negative 32 plus 20 plus 8x. Okay? And this is how I got negative 12 plus 8x. And all I did was I combined like terms. Done. And that's it. So I clearly wrote what I did. I wrote the sentence. I told the person what I did. First, I will distribute. And if I really want the negative 8. I did that. Then I will put the terms next to each other. Put like terms next to each other. And I'm allowed to do that because of the commutative property. Then I put like terms next to each other, commutative property. I did that. Finally, I combined like terms. And that's it. All right, give yourself a point if you have negative 12 plus 8x or 8x plus negative 12, and then give yourself another point if you showed your work how you got there. Finally, we're up to the last 2-point question. It's another show your work. It says probability question, and give yourself a point if you had the answer 1 over 18. And now I'm going to show you how I get full credit showing my work on paper and computer. All right, let's go. Jonah received a gift card to a movie theater. The gift card allows him to choose a movie, a snack, and a drink. Those are his options. He can do 3 different kinds of movies, 3 different kinds of snacks, 2 different drinks. He chooses 1 movie, 1 snack, and 1 drink at random. What is the probability that he chooses comedy, chips, and juice? And I have to show it as a fraction. So I want the probability, P, of comedy, chips, and juice. So for each of these, I'm going to figure out the fraction. What is the possibility of getting each of them? So the probability of getting comedy is 1 out of 3 different options. So 1/3 times the probability of getting chips is 1 out of 3, because there's 1 chips out of 3 options, and the probability of getting juice is 1/2, because there are only 2 of them and juice is 1 of them. So now that I have all this, all I have to do is multiply those 3 fractions. So 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 3 times 3 times 2 is 18. Done. So now we just have to show that. So we'll answer the question. What is the probability Jonah will choose a comma? The probability, I'm going to just restate it. A comedy, chips, and juice at random is, and I'm going to just put it as a fraction, 1 out of 18. Done. Now I just show my work. So I want the probability of comedy, chips, and juice that probability is equal to, and now I just have to type in my fractions. 1/3 times another fraction, 1/3 times another fraction, 1/2. And then I'll just put in probability is equal to 1 over 18. That's it. There's really not much else that I have to write here. It's showing that I know how to represent each probability as fractions. So I'll even say that. Represent each outcome as a fraction. And multiply. Okay. And that's what I did. So done. So give yourself a point if you got 1 over 18, and give yourself a point if you showed in your work how you found the probability of each one. All right, hit pause and jot this down into your notes. We're up to the end, the very last question. At the very end, the last 3-point question, number 48. The answer for this one, we have to show our work, and that means there are multiple steps here. So give yourself 1 point if you got the answer, $124.20. And then your additional points are going to be based on the work shown. Now, if you have a different answer, it's possible that your process was correct, but you probably made a computational error. So depending on the number of errors, or if your strategy wasn't sound, you might have additional points there. You might have lost them. But let's break this down. A furniture store is advertising a 20% discount on the price of sofas. Scott chooses a sofa that is with a discounted price of $460. He must also pay 8% sales tax. How much money will Scott save on the discounted sofa, including tax, compared to the original amount? Okay, so what do we already know? We know that the discounted price of the sofa plus tax is $460 times. Now I'm going to add the 8% tax. So instead of 108%, I'm going to do this 1.08. So we're going to do that part. So what would that be? Let's get our calculator. Clear it out. 460 times 1.08 is $496.80. Now, if some of you are only finding 8%, you might be doing the 8% and just adding it on. So that's fine too. I just like to do it in one step instead of finding a percent and then adding. I just did it all together, but it's fine if you found the 8% and then just added it to 460. Okay, so let's go to the original price. Let's figure that part because we want the original amount in there. So I'm going to make a proportion. We know that 460, and I like ratio tables, even though I know I'm going to have to write them as fractions. I know that they took 20% off, so that this is 80% of 100. Okay, how do I know that? Because it's a 20% discount, so I know that I paid 80%. So be on the lookout there. If you put 20 over 100, that might be the mistake that you're making. And this is the X that we're trying to figure out. We're cross multiplying. And when you cross multiply, you get 80 is equal to, 80x is equal to 460 times 100, so 46,000. And now we're going to divide both sides by 80. So X is equal to, of course I'm using my calculator again, and I get 575. So that 575 means that was the original price. Okay, this was the original. But we're not done yet because they want to know how much did we, we're still not done because we also have to do the tax. Okay, so we'll do that part. So we'll do 575 times 1.08. And so with tax, it is $621. That was the original price with tax. This was the discounted price with tax. All right, and our final step is we have to subtract to find out the difference because that's what they wanted. So 621 minus 496.80 is equal to 621 minus 496.80 is equal to 124. Our calculator is going to say this, but we know we're talking about money, so we'll do this. All right, so there we go. Look and see all the different things I had to do. So one, I needed to find out how much the discount was with tax. That was the first thing we did. Then two, I needed to find out what the original price was. Then three, I need to find out what the original price was with tax. And then four, I had to figure out how much he was saving when I took the original price minus the discounted price. So that's a lot to show. So we're going to start. Again, we're at the end. This is when you're the most tired. So if you need to take a water break at this point, if you need to splash water on your face, if you need to just look somewhere else for a minute, do that to give your brain a little bit of a rest because you're right at the end. All right, we're going to start by just answering that final question. How much money will Scott save on the discounted sofa? Scott will save $124.20 on the discounted sofa with tax. Done. That's all I had to do compared to the originally priced sofa with tax. Okay, so all I had to do. We know we're gonna need some space, so let's just give ourselves the space here, and we're gonna start because I have to show my work and I have to make it logical. So I'm going to say the first thing I did. First, I found the price of the discounted sofa with tax. I'm just going to tell them what I'm going to do, and just to keep it super organized. Times 1.08 is equal to 496.80. Okay. It looks a little funky, but it's okay. With 8% tax. All right, so that's the first thing we did. Then, I found the original price of the sofa with 8% tax. Okay, so I have to show that part in here. So I'm going to write the proportion, because again, I have a ratio square, but that's really two fractions. So we're going to put 460 over x is equal to 80 over 100. Okay. I'll give myself a little space. 80x. Actually, I want to put it here. 80x is equal to 4,600. Divide both expressions by 80. 80x divided by 80 is equal to 4,600 divided by 80. And I get x is equal to $575. That x bothers me, so I just do that. This is the original cost. Okay, and if I wanted to, I can again keep splitting my work. So what's the next thing I found next? I find the original cost with 8% tax. Okay, so first I found the original price of the sofa. Next, I find the original cost with 8% tax. So I did 575 times 1.08 is equal to $621. Okay. Finally, I found the difference between the original price and discounted price with tax. 621 minus 496.80, and I just make sure I have it all in there, is 124.20, and done. So I'm gonna just check over my work and look at it one more time. First, I found the price of the discounted sofa with 8% tax. 460 times 1.08 is 496.80. That matches my work. Then I found the original price of the sofa. 460 over x is equal to 80 over 100. 80x is equal to 46,000. Divide both expressions by 80. 80x divided by 80 is equal to 46,000 divided by 80. So x was equal to 575. This is the original cost of the sofa. Next, I find the original cost of 8% tax. So I did 575 times 1.08, and I got 621. Finally, I found the difference between the original price and the discounted price with tax. 621 minus 496.80 equals 124.20. Scott will save 124.20 on the discounted sofa with tax compared to the original price sofa with tax. And there we have it. So you can see how for this one to look at your work, and you have to decide 1, do you give yourself a 0, 1, 2, or 3? Give yourself a 3 if you got 124.20 and all your work shows how you got there very clearly. And that means even if you did it on paper, it clearly shows it. And if you did it on computer, you're still showing it. You've copied over the important things. And if you made some type of computational error, or if you made like one mistake, you might take away a point. If you made multiple mistakes, you might have to take away 2 points. And if you were totally off base, give yourself 0 points. But that's it. This is the final problem of the 7th grade exam. Give yourself a big round of applause for finishing this up. Now I want you to go back and you're going to add up all the points from the multiple choice and from the constructive response. Remember, multiple choice was worth 1 point each. And the constructive response, I gave you the number of points. So count those up. All right, now that you've added up all your points for all 48 questions, remember all the multiple choice, there were 38 of them were worth 1 point, and then you had 1, 2, and 3 point problems. You probably also noticed that the biggest chunks of your test were ratio and proportions and expressions and equations. These are the 2 biggest parts from the state test, and I also tried to make sure that this test was within those ranges. The smallest part would be from geometry, which are scale problems. And then you also had a little bit from number sense and a little bit from stats and probability. So what does all this translate to? We know the most amount of points were definitely RP and EE problems, algebra ones. If you added up all your points out of the 56 points, then you would get to this type of scale. If you had, and I'm going to highlight it here, in order to get a level 3, and I made this test a little bit harder, this scale, because I'd rather us try harder during practice than think we got this, it's too easy, and then we kind of rest and think the state test is going to be just as easy. You never know. So you needed 36 points to get a level 3. You needed 21 points to get a level 2. And you would need 54 points, almost perfect, to get to a level 4. So that's how I wrote this out for you, so we can practice pretty hard. But here you have it. If you figure out, let's say if you had 32 points, then you would have had a 2.73, which is still a level 2, but it is a higher 2. If you had 45 points, you would have a 3.50, which is still a 3, but it's in the middle of the 3s. And so whatever you have now, you have all this time between now and the state test. You still have some time. So what I would do is look and see what kinds of problems that you were still struggling with. And those are the ones you want to practice with. Don't just practice on the things you know how to do. Practice on the ones that are a little bit tougher and ask questions. Feel free to ask here in the comments. I opened it up for this video. Feel free to ask your teachers for more practice problems like this. And you can also ask me for more videos on those topics, and I'm happy to help. That's it for today's video, 7th graders. Thank you for sitting through this. I know this was a long video, but you are doing this to get as much practice as possible, because I know you can achieve a lot of success on the 7th grade exam. So I hope this was helpful. Share it with friends if you found it helpful, and I will see you in the next video. Be well, Math Marvels. Bye.